introduction. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. This is terrific, and I'm really happy to be here. Thought I would talk a little bit about the Research Data Alliance, and let's talk about, in some sense, the reason for the Research Data Alliance, which is something we all experience. And it's pretty clear that here in the information age, data is driving solutions to, essentially any problem you look at. If you're trying to worry about the impact of a large earthquake or how disease spreads in urban populations or, agricultural productivity, typically what researchers are doing is they're combining data sets from different sources. If you want to look at earthquake simulations, you're combining information about faults and subsurfaces and buildings and population, perhaps physical critical infrastructure, et cetera. Disease models, I think many of you can talk to that much more than I can. You want medical data, population data, environmental data, et cetera. So all of these questions really require combining data from disparate sources and doing it in a way you can focus on the question itself and the kinds of innovations you want to take in your approach. Now, this isn't just clear to the research community. You're really finding increasing recognition among the press. And this is even the popular press in talking about the value of sharing data to accelerate innovation. You're hearing it from the Department of Justice, from the New York Times, from the Wall Street Journal, from the health community, et cetera. And it's starting to be news, which is really a different kind of a thing for all of us. To imagine that it be, front page news that astronomers released a data set, or that the Alzheimer's community is making so much progress with the ADNI initiative, et cetera. So sharing data is a big deal, and sharing data is an underlying foundation to the kind of innovation that we can do at this point in time. Now, it turns out that when you want to share data, that integrating data across particular professional and research cultures. Oh, okay. Hi, all of you out there. Uh-oh, stop sharing. That should not be in my talk.
There we go. Okay. All right, everybody on the phone, you should be seeing slides now.
Okay, don't stop sharing. So it turns out that integrating data across cultures or scales or, technologies requires infrastructure. We need some sort of plumbing to make this happen. And there's all kinds of concrete pieces of infrastructure we need. Metadata standards, different kind of interoperability and integration frameworks, policy, data access and preservation policy, harmonized standards, et cetera. And if you think about it, right now I can go to virtually any hotel in, most places in the world, and I can log in and read my email. Now, why can I do that? Is it because that my plug fits in all the sockets everywhere across the world? It's not true. There is no sort of universal Esperanto plug that works everywhere. However, a good enough solution is I have my little bag of plug adapters, and some of them work in Germany, and some of them work in Singapore, some of them work in Canada, and that enables me to do what I need to do. Similarly, we build infrastructure all the time. It does not approach everyone. You go to Disneyland and you want to ride on the roller coaster, maybe it's built for people of a certain size. You have to be this tall to, I can't ride on some of them, to say the truth. But no, you have to be a certain size to be able to use it because that's the way the infrastructure is built. So typically the infrastructure is built to have a substantive impact, but it doesn't need to sort of solve everybody's problem everywhere. And that's behind the thinking behind the Research Data Alliance. So this is an international organization, community-driven, and the idea is to build the social, organizational, and technical infrastructure to reduce the barriers to data sharing and exchange and accelerate the development of coordinated global infrastructure. Not one architecture for everyone. The idea is to build substantive, concrete pieces of infrastructure that help communities move forward, just like we've been hearing this morning. And the focus is to create infrastructure, adopt that infrastructure, and use the infrastructure. So the working groups in the RDA, they operate for a relatively short period of time. They're a year and a half. The idea is to build and use targeted pieces of data infrastructure. These groups are typically not generating reports or surveying or recommendations, really important venues for that elsewhere. The idea is to build concrete pieces of infrastructure to complement what's going on. So the meat of what's done in the RDA is really focused on the RDA community, and RDA community are coming together in two particularly important ways. First of all, there are interest groups, and these are people who have common interests. They want to build out the infrastructure in a particular area to solve the kinds of problems that their communities are seeing. When there are concrete pieces of infrastructure that address certain kinds of problems and would need to be adopted, they propose working groups. And so working groups are another kind of vehicle. These are tiger teams. So the idea is that you have the users of the infrastructure, the developers of the infrastructure, and the adopters of the infrastructure all together in a similar team. They interact for about a year and a half. They are focusing on creating pieces of code, specific policies that become adopted, harmonized standards, infrastructure, best practices, et cetera. Typically, these are kind of harvestable efforts, efforts for which some concentrated piece of work will kind of push you to a place where you have some concrete infrastructure that someone can use. They apply to chunks of the community, but not necessarily everyone. We have people in the agricultural community wanting to share around the wheat database. That's different from people in the marine biology community or people looking at harmonized standards about different things. And they're efforts for which we can start today. So you kind of think about Research Data Alliance as kind of building, these footholds in Research Mountain. You climb on it and you kind of get to keep going up and up and up. And the idea is that other people can come along and use those footholds as well. But the idea isn't that, they're for absolutely everybody. So RDA is actually 3 months old. This is our babyhood, I guess. We launched on March 18th to 20th in Gothenburg, Sweden. We had over 200 participants, so about 240 participants from 31 countries and 5 continents. Over the 3 days, there were over 6,400 tweets. I haven't put all of them here, but I have a few of them just so you can kind of see what people are saying. We had representation from the public, private, and academic sectors, some very high-profile government and science speakers, including Fran here from the NSF. We had Neelie Kroes, who's Vice President of the European Commission in charge of data. We had the Australian ambassador to the Europe and NATO talk as well. Something that was really interesting that started coming out is that RDA can really serve as a neutral space. And it's a neutral space for various organizations, various countries, various agencies, various domains, et cetera, for people to kind of come together, get something done, and then interact and help build the data community. So I thought I would sort of give you a little bit of snapshot. Things are sort of growing and changing as we speak, but the interest groups, we have about 12 on the RDA website right now. This gives you a little taste of it. One of the interest groups that I think is pretty intriguing that I wanted to share with you is we have a new interest group in agricultural data. These are people that are really interested in making various common and important data collections around wheat interoperable, and they want to create a framework that interoperates a number of these things. Once they decide exactly what they want to do, they will propose a working group, and then the working group will work to actually create the infrastructure and help this group. We have a number of working groups that have been approved. To get approved, there's a community review period. There's a technical review just to make sure it makes sense. And then there is a council review in terms of making sure it aligns with the impact-oriented approach of RDA. Right now we have 2 formal working groups. We have 2 or 3 others under consideration. And you'll notice that some of this is the very important foundational stuff, but a little hard to describe outside the community. For example, we have a working group on persistent identifier information types. When you have a number of different persistent identifier systems, not a million, but perhaps not one, you want to be able to translate between one and another. And so this helps you understand which kinds of information types translate between so the Spanish system and the English system, for example. And this group is identifying a framework for those information types, and it'll be adopted at the German Supercomputing Center and some other sites. As of a few weeks ago, the community, which started with 8 people on the phone in August, the pre-meeting had about 100 people in October. The launch had about 240 people, and now the RDA community on the mailing list and in the RDA forum is about 700 participants from 44 countries. It's a little hard to tell by sector, but it appears from this list that about 61% are academics. Private sector, so this is roughly about 140 folks, are from the private sector. Public sector, we have about 11%. And then it's hard to tell because those 8% are giving us their Gmails or something like that, and we can't really tell where they're from. But as you can see, a number of countries all around the world, multiple continents. So this is something that's really taking off, and in a much more accelerated way than even we thought last August. I wanted to talk a little bit about why the RDA is important, in particular to the U.S. And, internationally, all of the issues that we're talking about here are important in countries all over the world. And if you really look at what's going on in Europe and Australia and Asia and, all over the place, these are big issues. And they are big issues that are being dealt with by the academic sector, by the public sector, by the private sector, et cetera. It's important for the U.S. to have a leading role, to really stay on top of this. We're in the information age. We should be leading in all of our technologies and our systems around data and information. So it's strategically important to us. And for our researchers, for the U.S. to be in a lead really increases our global competitiveness. Nationally, as we all know, this is a tremendously exciting and interesting time. In the last few years, we've seen a number of high-profile, top-tier memoranda and priorities, whether they be data management plan or public access or big data initiatives, et cetera. This is important stuff to the U.S. And the community that's coming to RDA in the U.S. is precisely the community that is actually we need to help solve these problems in the U.S. So RDA becomes sort of this neutral gathering place for many of the U.S. Researchers, private sector people, public sector people, et cetera, who really care about these issues. And in fact, the kinds of infrastructure that comes out of the RDA really provide a vehicle for implementing the underlying infrastructure that will be required to make many of the approaches around public access, around data management plans, around infrastructure work. I want to tell you about a particular opportunity, and I want to invite you all to reserve on your calendars September 16th to 18th. The U.S. will be hosting the second plenary of the Research Data Alliance. It'll be at the National Academies and some random hotel that I can't tell you what it is yet in Washington, D.C. It's really an opportunity not just to convene and have a working meeting for the RDA community, but to highlight and show off the U.S. efforts and to convene data-enabled organizations around this neutral space that the RDA is providing. And so I encourage you to come to participate, to send your colleagues, and it would be great to have a really terrific U.S. showing in it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.